I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the cold light above flickering just enough to remind me I was doing my makeup in a room that doubled as our laundry space. My hands trembled slightly as I applied mascara, careful not to let the brush slip. Tonight wasn't about me, but I couldn't shake the weight pressing on my chest. I adjusted the dark blue dress, rented, a bit too tight around the ribs, and smelling faintly of someone else's perfume. The tag itched against my back, but I didn't dare cut it off. I couldn't afford the damage fee. Behind me, Noah stood on his tiptoes, adjusting the knot on his tiny clip-on tie in the mirror. His reflection was a blur of excitement. He wore the little gray suit I had saved for by skipping lunch for 2 weeks. He looked like he was about to accept a trophy instead of attend a wedding we had barely been invited to. "Mom," he said, eyes wide, "do I look like a real gentleman?" I smiled. "You look better than one." Noah beamed and spun in a circle, letting the sleeves flap slightly as he moved. My heart ached watching him, so proud, so unaware of the minefield we were about to walk into. He believed this day would bring us closer to the family. He believed his Aunt Sophie's wedding would be a new start. I wished I could believe that too. The invitation had come late, stuffed into our mailbox 3 days before the RSVP deadline, and misspelled at that. Emily had become Amelia. Our address was handwritten and barely legible, as if someone remembered us at the last minute. I held the card in my hands for 10 minutes that day, staring at it like it might erase all the past hurt just by existing. I should have said no. But I said yes. I told myself it was for closure, that maybe Sophie had grown, that maybe my mother Margaret had finally accepted me and my son, that maybe my family had space for more than perfection and performance. I told myself things I didn't believe, just to justify buying Noah's suit and renting this dress and spending the next few days pretending we belonged. The venue was an old mansion nestled on a hill just outside the city. When we arrived, I parked our aging sedan as far from the luxury cars as I could. Noah climbed out and looked up at the giant house with wonder. "It looks like a castle," he whispered. I nodded. "A very expensive one." Inside, the space was breathtaking. White roses in glass vases, chandeliers that sparkled like starlight, waiters gliding through with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Every surface gleamed. Every person shimmered. Sophie had spared no expense. This was the wedding of a woman who had always known how to dazzle. We were directed to our table. Table 9. Near the restrooms. I forced a smile and guided Noah to our seats. I helped him with his napkin and ignored the sideways glances from relatives who hadn't spoken to me since Noah was born. My mother swept past our table without even a nod. Her perfume lingered longer than her attention. Then Sophie appeared. She floated into the reception like she was born to be photographed. Her dress shimmered with hand-sewn crystals, and her blonde curls were pinned just enough to look effortless. People gasped when they saw her. The music seemed to follow her steps. When she noticed us, her smile dimmed slightly. "You made it," she said. Her tone was neutral. Not warm. Not cold. Just surprised. Her eyes flicked down to Noah. "He's getting big." No hug. No welcome. No acknowledgement of the years between us. And just like that, she vanished into a sea of guests. I tried to focus on Noah. He was happy. He marveled at the chandelier and whispered that Sophie looked like a princess. For a while, that was enough. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I helped him when he spilled mousse on his tie. I stayed quiet when I heard my name murmured behind champagne glasses. I clapped politely during the first dance. I played my role. The invisible older sister. The polite outsider. Then the toasts began. And everything shifted. The groom's best friend stood up first. A few harmless jokes, some light laughter, a touch of sentimentality. Then came Sophie. She rose slowly, every eye in the room drawn to her as if pulled by gravity. She raised her glass and smiled. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she began. It means the world to me and Daniel to have so many people we love in one place. My throat tightened as I watched her scan the room, pausing for effect. And of course, she continued, I want to say something special about my big sister. Noah nudged my arm. His eyes lit up. I smiled down at him, trying to keep the hope in my chest from spilling over. Maybe, just maybe, Sophie was about to offer an olive branch. Maybe this was the moment everything changed. She turned slightly toward our table. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Emily has always been such an example of strength. A single mother. So independent. So resilient. I straightened slightly. My heart pounded. This might actually be kind. She's managed to raise a child all on her own. No help. No husband. Just her. And, of course, whoever was available to babysit. A few people chuckled. My smile faltered. But really, she added with a smirk, it's impressive how she keeps showing up, even when no one really asked her to. Laughter broke out across the room. Sharp. Cold. Real. And just like that, the fairy tale was over. I looked down at Noah. His smile was gone. His eyes were wide. His tiny fingers gripped my hand tightly. He looked up at me, confused. Hurt. My chest caved in. The story had just begun, but the ending I feared was already closing in. I did not move. I did not speak. My fingers curled tightly around the cloth napkin in my lap, gripping it like a lifeline. The laughter still echoed in the chandeliered room, bouncing off the polished walls like glass breaking again and again. I stared straight ahead, willing myself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of Noah. Beside me, my son tugged at my sleeve. His voice was barely a whisper. Why did she say that, Mom? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My tongue was sandpaper. My throat had closed. The question hung in the air like smoke. Before I could gather myself, another voice pierced through the noise. My mother's. Margaret never missed a moment to perform, especially when the crowd was warm and ready. She's a used product, she said from her table with a laugh. But she still polishes up well. The laughter returned, louder, crueler. This time, it came with clinking glasses and snide smiles. It was no longer a toast. It was a public execution dressed in silk and candlelight. I looked around, desperate to find one face, just one, that would meet my eyes with humanity. My uncle stared at his phone. My cousin whispered behind a manicured hand. Even Grandpa Walter, who used to call me his little lion, kept his eyes fixed on his untouched dessert. No one stood. No one spoke. The silence of the people I once loved was heavier than any insult. I looked down at Noah. His eyebrows furrowed in confusion. His lips trembled. That was the moment it all shattered. It wasn't the laughter. It wasn't the insult. It was watching my son try to understand why the world was laughing at the woman who made his breakfast, patched his jeans, kissed every scraped knee. His hero was being mocked. And he didn't know how to protect me. I wanted to leave. To stand up, grab Noah's hand, and walk out of that golden room and never look back. But my legs wouldn't move. My voice was locked behind a dam of shame. Then suddenly, the sound of a chair scraping back broke through the laughter. It came from the head table. Daniel. He stood slowly, deliberately, his posture rigid. He did not look at Sophie. He did not look at Margaret. His gaze locked onto mine, and the room went utterly still. He reached for the microphone, took it from Sophie's hand without a word. The laughter stopped. No more clinking glasses. No more whispers. Just silence. He did not smile. He did not clear his throat. He simply spoke, his voice calm and low.
"Emily," he said, "do not go."
A hush swept over the room. I froze. Everyone turned toward him. Daniel's hand was steady, his eyes still on me. He stepped down from the platform, walking past Sophie, past the polished floral arch, down the marble aisle, and toward our table. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened," he said, louder now. "I won't sit here and let cruelty pass as comedy." A murmur rippled through the guests. Daniel continued, "For the past year, I have heard about tradition, appearances, and family honor. But tonight, I saw mockery.
I saw shame thrown at a woman who walked in here with grace, with strength, and with her son."
He turned to Sophie. "You humiliated your sister. You made her son watch it happen."
"And for what?"
A cheap laugh. Sophie opened her mouth, but Daniel didn't wait for an answer. "She showed up." She smiled. "She sat quietly while you paraded cruelty as entertainment. And you think that makes you the star of the evening?" He faced the crowd. "Emily didn't ask for a speech. She didn't ask for praise. She certainly didn't ask for your judgment. But I will not marry into a family that sees kindness as weakness. I will not build my future on top of someone else's humiliation." There was no sound but the soft hum of the chandelier and the pulse in my ears. Sophie stood frozen, her hand still holding her untouched champagne glass. Margaret's expression was unreadable. Then Daniel turned to Noah. "Your mom," he said gently, "is the strongest person in this room. Never forget that." He looked back at me one final time. "I have seen enough." And with that, he set the microphone down, walked past Sophie without another word, and disappeared out the door into the night. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever known. And for the first time in years, it was not me left carrying the shame. The ballroom did not move. Chairs stayed pushed in. Hands stayed still. No music returned.
The air had shifted, heavy and stale, as if someone had opened a window and the soul of the evening had escaped into the night.
I stood, slowly, still holding Noah's hand. He looked up at me, his grip tight, searching my face for instructions. I gave none. I had no words left. I had survived dinner parties where no one looked me in the eye. Holidays where gifts were exchanged while I served wine from the kitchen. Years of family portraits where I was conveniently absent. But nothing, not even the cold shoulder of blood, prepared me for public ridicule dressed in crystal and candlelight. I turned toward the door, guiding Noah with me, when another voice broke the stillness. "What an ungrateful boy," my mother snapped. Her voice was sharp, louder than necessary, as if trying to reclaim control. "He embarrassed you in front of everyone. Typical. Just like your sister. Selfish." The words fell flat. Her power, once absolute, now sounded tinny and hollow. No one agreed. No one echoed her. She stood alone in her anger, her rage cracking against a wall of silence. Sophie did not defend herself. She remained at the head table, eyes glassy, mouth parted slightly like someone who had forgotten how to speak. I did not respond. I did not look back. For the first time in my life, I did not flinch at the sound of my mother's voice. Noah squeezed my hand again. "Are we leaving?" he whispered. "Yes, baby," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We're going home." As we walked toward the exit, the crowd parted like water. Some turned away. Others lowered their eyes. A few opened their mouths as if to speak, but found nothing. They let us pass, step by step, shame not mine anymore but scattered on the marble floor around us. Then I heard my name. "Emily." I stopped. It was Grandpa Walter. He stood beside his chair, unsteady, his eyes rimmed red. He had not said a word all evening. Now, his voice trembled.
"I'm sorry," he said, barely more than a breath.
I should have stopped it. Years ago. I nodded once. No bitterness. No fury. Just the weight of understanding between us. I knew what silence cost. I had lived in it. Breathed it. I did not carry his guilt for him. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. I took a long breath. So did Noah. His shoulders dropped as we stepped down the stone stairs. The lights from the reception hall glowed behind us, but I did not look back. Noah spoke first. Is the wedding over? I smiled, tired but whole. Yes, I said. It ended exactly the way it was supposed to. We drove home in silence. No music. Just the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of Noah tapping his fingers against the window glass. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the steering with a stillness I had never known before. That night, I tucked Noah into bed. He didn't ask anything more. I kissed his forehead and lingered by the door a little longer than usual. He turned on his side and pulled the blanket up to his chin. In the quiet, I realized something. Something had cracked that night, yes, but not me. Something that had needed breaking finally broke. And I, at last, was walking out of the fire. I woke to 12 missed calls. My phone buzzed again in my palm, lighting up with another unknown number. I stared at the screen from the edge of my bed, the morning sun peeking through the blinds as if it, too, was unsure whether to enter. I didn't answer. Not one of them. I didn't need to. Most of the numbers belonged to distant cousins, people who had not acknowledged me since high school. Others were from guests whose names I barely recognized, but who had apparently rediscovered their conscience overnight. I ignored every call. My silence was not anger. It was choice. Then a message appeared. It was from Mia, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. She had been at the wedding. Her words were short, urgent, and impossible to ignore. Someone recorded Daniel's speech. It's on Facebook. Over 50,000 views already. You need to see the comments. I hesitated, thumb hovering above the link. My heart pounded in a way it hadn't since I stood in that ballroom. Finally, I tapped the screen. There it was. The video began mid-sentence, capturing Daniel's voice as he stood with a microphone. I saw myself, frozen, seated beside Noah, his small hand clutched in mine. I heard every word again, but this time, surrounded not by laughter, but by silence and the digital hum of people finally paying attention. I scrolled down. Comment after comment. This man is a hero. She deserved better. I'm crying watching this. Every single mother just got a little bit of justice. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, unmoving, letting the weight of it pass through me like wind through a cracked window. Something that had lived inside my chest for years, something clenched and quiet and buried deep, loosened. I wasn't invisible anymore. Later that afternoon, a small bouquet arrived at my apartment. Wildflowers, tied with twine. No florist tag. Just a small card tucked between the petals. To the lioness. There was no signature. But I knew who had sent it. The wedding, if it could still be called that, never resumed. There was no dancing. No cake cutting. No smiling portraits under fairy lights. Sophie had tried, in the days that followed, to reclaim the narrative. She said Daniel overreacted. That it was just a joke. That people were being too sensitive. But the story had already taken flight. People saw what they saw. No one was laughing anymore. 3 days later, Sophie and Daniel officially called off the engagement. There was no statement, no dramatic farewell. Just a quiet untagging of photos, a slow disappearance from each other's social media. A digital erasure of a night no filter could fix. My mother called me once. Not to apologize. Not to ask if I was all right. She called to say I had embarrassed the family by not laughing along. I held the phone to my ear for exactly 30 seconds. Then I said, clear and calm, "I'm not your scapegoat anymore." And I hung up. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was clean. And it was final. I stood by the window afterward, holding the phone in both hands, and realized I didn't need a grand apology. I didn't need them to change. I didn't need them to recognize what I had become. I only needed to stop asking their permission to see it in myself. My life didn't transform overnight. There was no parade, no miracle, no flood of new beginnings. The next day, I still worked both jobs. I poured coffee for strangers in the morning, smiled politely while they scrolled through their phones, then returned home to cook dinner, help Noah with his reading, and prepare for my second shift at the hotel reception desk. Some nights, I made 2 meals, pancakes for him, something green for me. The same patch of ceiling leaked when it rained. The same neighbors argued too loudly through the paper-thin walls. The world did not change. But I did. I walked straighter. I did not shrink in doorways or apologize for speaking too long. I no longer sat in the back row at parent meetings. I asked questions. I smiled at the other moms. And when they asked, with wide eyes and polite curiosity, "Was that really you in the video?" I nodded without shame. Noah changed too. He asked more questions now. Thoughtful ones. About kindness. About cruelty. About courage. He began standing up for classmates. He no longer apologized when he was not wrong. He talked about Daniel like he was some kind of superhero. He even gave one of his action figures a name, the Defender, and lined him up each night beside the others. Sometimes I found him rehearsing speeches in his room, standing tall in front of a cracked mirror, practicing how to speak up when it counts. One evening, while we were brushing our teeth, Noah looked at me through the mirror. His eyes were soft, steady. "Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Sophie said?" I paused, the toothbrush still in my mouth. I rinsed, then looked at him. "Not anymore," I said. "Why?" he asked, a bit of toothpaste clinging to his chin. I bent down, wiped it away gently with my thumb. "Because I think you won," he said, even though it wasn't a fight. I stood there for a moment, his words ringing louder than any applause. He turned and went back to his bedroom, leaving me in the quiet, blinking at my own reflection. He was right. I did win. But not with yelling. Not with bitterness. Not with retaliation. I won because I stood. Because I took my son's hand and walked out with my dignity. And someone else, someone I had never expected, chose to stand beside me. Daniel did not just defend me. He reminded an entire room what love looks like when it refuses to stay silent. And in that reminder, a room full of people, and maybe the world outside it, learned that there is nothing more powerful than a woman who no longer needs their approval to believe in her own worth. And nothing braver than the child who sees her clearly and calls her what she is. Strong. Whole. Unshakable. The lioness never roared. But she never had to.